Welcome, deep divers. Ever just stop and think about, well, the whole incredible journey of life right from the very start? Even out there in the animal kingdom, that miracle of birth, it doesn't always go perfectly smoothly. Today, we're diving into something that gives a really, well, profound, maybe a bit sobering, but definitely fascinating look at that. Congenital malformations, birth defects. We're going to explore these unexpected challenges that pop up during development and how they look in two surprisingly different animal families. So our mission here is pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the key nuggets of info from the sources you've given us, kind of a shortcut for you to get up to speed on this aspect of animal health that often gets overlooked. You'll find some really distinct patterns, I think, and some surprising common ground too. Lots of aha moments, hopefully. Okay, so today we're comparing these congenital issues in the Camelidae family, that's your camels, llamas, alpacas, and the Cervidae family, which is deer, elk, moose, that whole group.
We'll look at the specific conditions, what might be causing them, and really importantly, how they affect the animals' lives. Okay, let's unpack this, see what the sources tell us. Right, first things first, to make sure we're all on the same page. When we say congenital malformation, what exactly are we talking about? It sounds technical, but it's really basic biology, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. Basically, congenital malformations are structural or functional problems that start way back during development inside the uterus. They're essentially errors that happen while the fetus is growing. Sometimes you can spot them at birth, maybe even before with imaging, or sometimes they only become obvious later on.
Okay, so what makes these things happen? Is it just bad luck in the genetic lottery, or are other factors involved?
It's usually not just one single thing. The causes are, well, pretty varied. It can range from, genetic mutations or issues with chromosomes, the real basic building blocks, all the way to exposure to what we call teratogenic factors. So that could be things in the environment, like certain viruses, toxins, or even, say, nutritional imbalances in the mother while she's pregnant. What's really fascinating, I think, is how these root causes can lead to such different results across species, even if the mechanisms are sort of similar underneath. And while you see these issues everywhere in the animal kingdom, how often they occur and what type of defects show up can be really, really different.
Okay, now this is where I found it got super interesting right off the bat. Our sources mention that camelids, especially South American ones like llamas and alpacas, seem to have a higher rate of these defects compared to a lot of other domestic animals. That really jumped out. Why might that be?
Yeah, that is a significant point in the research. It's often multifactorial, like we said, meaning several things contribute. But there's pretty strong evidence pointing towards genetics and hereditary links playing a major role in that higher rate. This suggests, certain genetic predispositions. Maybe they get concentrated through breeding practices in domestic herds where people select for specific traits but inadvertently carry these defect risks along too. But of course, those teratogenic factors, environmental exposures during pregnancy, they can definitely play a part as well.
Right, so it's complex, but maybe breeding has unintentionally amplified some issues. Okay, let's get into specifics, starting with the head and face craniofacial stuff. The sources highlight some common and pretty severe ones here, like choanal CA.
Yes, choanal that's a huge one for llamas and alpacas, particularly the newborns. The Criahas, it's often called the most widespread and commonly diagnosed lethal defect in them.
Lethal, that's the key word, isn't it?
Yeah.
What exactly is happening and why is it so deadly for them?
So it's basically a blockage. It can be a membrane or even bone blocking the choana. Those are the passages that connect the nostrils to the back of the throat, the pharynx. Now, the critical thing here, like you mentioned earlier, is that camelids are obligate nasal breathers. They have to breathe through their noses. So if that blockage is on both sides, bilateral, the criteria is an immediate, severe respiratory distress. They just can't breathe properly, and they can't nurse without aspirating milk into their lungs because of that breathing difficulty, which leads to death very quickly. If it's just one side, unilateral, they might survive, but they're never quite right. There's a strong genetic link suspected, and sadly, surgery. Generally not considered a good option.
Wow, that's incredibly harsh. Really shows how vital something as simple as breathing through your nose is for some species. Just life or death. Okay, then there's maxillofacial dysgenesis, wry face. Sounds like what it describes, a sort of twisted face.
Exactly. It's a sideways deviation, a twisting of the upper jaw, the maxilla, and sometimes the lower jaw too, the mandible. Seems particularly noted in llamas. The severity varies quite a bit, and sometimes it actually occurs alongside choanal. In the really bad cases, euthanasia is often the only humane course because of the functional problems.
And besides those two main ones, I saw mentions of other head issues like cleft palate
and hydrocephalus, that's the fluid on the brain, right? There was even a specific case mentioned of a dromedary camel calf that died, had multiple problems. Hydrocephalus, cleft lip, and an ophthalmia, meaning missing an eye.
Yeah, anophthalmia, absence of an eye. That case really highlights the potential range, doesn't it? Multiple severe defects occurring together. And moving beyond the head, you also see a whole spectrum of musculoskeletal defects. Things like angular limb deformities, crooked legs or extra toes, fused toes, even joints that are sort of stuck in position, contracted. These can range from minor things to severe deformities that stop a career from standing up or nursing properly, which obviously impacts survival right away. Again, could be genetic or sometimes things happening in the womb, like positioning or maybe nutritional issues for the mother.
Okay, so head, limbs.
Yeah.
But the sources also pointed out something really striking about camelids, urogenital defects. They said these are notably more common than in other species. That seems like a key difference.
It really does set them apart in the literature, yeah. For females, you see things like uterus unicornis, basically having only one uterine horn instead of two. Though, interestingly, many effective females can still carry a pregnancy just fine. You also see things like underdeveloped ovaries, ovarian hypoplasia, or double cervices. Sometimes parts of the reproductive tract just haven't formed, that's segmental aplasia, or issues with the vulva, like vulvar atresia.
And for the males, what kinds of issues pop up there?
In males, common things listed are cotorchidism, where one or both testicles don't descend properly, underdeveloped tests, a persistent frenulum on the penis, testes ending up in the wrong place, ectopic testicles, and hypospadias, which is where the urethral opening isn't in the right spot.
And heart problems, too, apparently quite common. With ventricular septal defects, VSDs being the most typical one mentioned. Can you break down what a VSD is?
Sure. A VSD is essentially a hole in the wall, the septum, that separates the heart's two main pumping chambers, the ventricles. This hole lets blood flow abnormally between them, usually from the left side, which has higher pressure, to the right side. This puts extra strain on the right side of the heart and sends too much blood flow to the lungs. Over time, this can cause volume overload, pulmonary issues, poor growth, exercise intolerance, eventually potential heart failure. You might hear specific heart murmurs if you listen with a stethoscope. Small ones might not cause major issues, but larger ones often need managing, and prognosis really depends on the size. Other more complex heart defects, like tetralogy of Fallot, have also been reported, though less commonly than VSDs.
Okay, so the heart's definitely not spared. And internally, what about the gut? The research mentioned things like atresia ani, missionatus, and atresia coli, a blockage in the colon. I thought it was interesting that specifically in camels, atresia coli, the colon blockage, seems to be reported more often than atresia ani. Is there any known reason for that difference?
Yes, both of those are seen and can be very serious, obviously. Atresia ani stops them from defecating normally, leads to bloating, discomfort, needs surgery fast. Atresia coli, the colon blockage, yeah. The sources don't really speculate why it might be more common than atresia ani specifically in camels, but it's a pattern that's been observed. It suggests maybe a specific vulnerability in how the camel gut develops.
Interesting. And just one last cool or maybe strange detail for the Camelidae section. In alpacas, there's a link between being born deaf and having a pure white coat and blue eyes.
Right. It's one of those fascinating things, isn't it? Shows how genetics can tie seemingly unrelated things together. Developmental pathways for hearing, pigment production, they can overlap. Piebald, patchy coloration has also been noted in dromedaries too.
Okay, so we've got this picture of camelids, especially domestic ones, having this higher reported rate, often with strong genetic links, and survival sometimes depending on us intervening. Now, let's switch gears completely to Cervidae, the deer family. Our sources paint a really different picture here, particularly for wild deer. Nature's filtering effect is much stronger, right? You might think fewer defects, but it's more complicated than that.
It is, yeah. It's documented less often in wild deer, but that doesn't necessarily mean it happens less often. The key difference is survival. An affected fawn in the wild, its chances are really low. Predators pick them off quickly, or they just can't keep up and succumb to the elements or starvation before we'd ever likely see them. So that observation bias is huge. As for causes, it's often unclear in wild cases. Genetics are suspected, sure, but so are nutritional issues, or maybe exposure to environmental toxins. Connecting this to the bigger picture, just the sheer difficulty of studying these things closely in vast wild populations means our understanding is shaped very differently compared to, say, a llama herd on a farm where every birth is watched.
That makes total sense. Natural selection in action, brutally efficient. Okay, let's talk coat color in deer, because there's that fascinating twist with piebaldism. It's not just about looking patchy, is it?
No, not at all. It goes much deeper. Piebaldism is genetic, causes those irregular white patches on a brown coat, sure. But the really crucial thing is the gene responsible is pleiotropic.
Pleiotropic, right.
Yeah.
You mentioned that before. One gene doing multiple jobs.
Exactly. So this one gene doesn't just affect coat color. Unfortunately, it can also cause a whole suite of pretty severe physical problems. Things like a bowed or Roman nose, crooked or shortened legs, an arched spine scoliosis, sometimes even defects in internal organs. And as you'd expect, fawns born with these severe issues, they generally don't last long out there. That single gene has widespread effects on development.
Wow. So it's fundamentally different from just being white, like albinism or leucism.
Hmm.
That's a key takeaway.
Absolutely. True albinism, no pigment at all. Pink eyes is super rare and genetically separate. Leucism gives you an all-white coat but normal eye color. And generally, neither albinism nor leucism is linked to those severe skeletal problems you see with piebald deer. It's really specific to that piebald gene effect.
Okay. And just like camelids, deer can also have craniofacial and skeletal issues, right?
They can, yes. Wry face or wry nose, that twisting of the muzzle that's been seen in white-tailed deer, and actually several other deer species too. Also things like brachynathia, that short lower jaw, and arthrogryposis, where the joints are basically fixed or contracted at birth, making movement really hard. Other limb deformities too, like bowed legs. And interestingly, there was a study mentioning osteopetrosis, abnormally dense, brittle bones, but that was specifically seen in an inbred captive herd of whitetails.
So that might hint at a genetic susceptibility that perhaps gets amplified in a more controlled, less diverse breeding situation.
Exactly. It suggests that under certain conditions, perhaps with less genetic diversity, these things can pop up more readily.
And eye problems. The sources mentioned systematic studies on free-ranging whitetails. What did they find there?
Yeah, they documented several congenital eye defects, things like microphthalmia, unusually small eyes, or anophthalmia, missing eyes altogether. Also congenital cataracts and colobomata, which are like gaps or clefts in parts of the eye structure. Often if a deer had one of these, it was in both eyes, so bilateral. But typically these eye issues weren't found alongside other major physical abnormalities in those wild deer studied.
Okay, and then urogenital stuff in antlers and deer.
Well, genital hypoplasia, underdeveloped genitals, has been noted. And then there's the phenomenon of antlered does, females with antlers. The research suggests this is often actually a sign of male pseudohermaphroditism. So genetically they're male, they have internal tests, but externally they appear female, except for the antlers sometimes. It's a really interesting developmental mix-up.
That is fascinating. And other antler weirdness.
Most other odd-looking antlers, deformed or non-typical shapes, are usually due to injuries to the antler while it's growing or hormonal imbalances, rather than being true congenital defects present from birth.
Gotcha. And there was that environmental angle, too, which really broadens the picture beyond just genetics, something about pesticides.
Yes, that was a specific regional finding. A significant percentage of male deer in one area showed issues like misposition or undersized scrota, and the study suggested a potential link to exposure to environmental pesticides in that region. It's a powerful reminder that external factors, chemicals in the environment, could potentially influence development in ways we're still figuring out.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground, a lot of different issues in both families. What does this all mean for people working with these animals? Or for trying to understand or even prevent these conditions? How are they diagnosed?
Well, diagnosis really starts with the basics. A thorough clinical exam. Just looking closely, feeling for abnormalities, observing how the animal moves and behaves. For things you can't see on the surface, imaging is key. X-rays, radiography are great for looking at bones, joints, spinal issues, and can sometimes give clues about heart size, suggesting a VSD. But for the heart specifically, an echocardiogram, an ultrasound of the heart, is really needed for a definite diagnosis of something like a VSD. It lets you actually see the hole and assess how much blood is flowing abnormally. Ultrasound can also be used for other internal organs, or even sometimes prenatally to check the fetus. And then, of course, there's genetic testing, especially if a condition is suspected to be inherited or if breeders want to screen animals to avoid passing on known genetic defects. It really raises the question of how we can best use all this genetic and environmental knowledge, doesn't it?
Yeah, it definitely sounds like you need a combination of tools. So, okay, what about prevention or control? Can anything actually be done to reduce how often these malformations happen?
To some extent, yes. Breeding management is a big one, especially in domestic species like llamas and alpacas. That means really carefully considering which animals to breed, avoiding those with known defects or those closely related to affected animals. Using genetic testing where available to screen potential parents is becoming more common too. Then there's prenatal care for the mother, ensuring she has adequate nutrition, monitoring for infectious diseases that could harm the fetus, and crucially, avoiding exposure to any known teratogens, those harmful substances during pregnancy. And finally, just being vigilant. Regular checkups for newborns, early detection, allows for prompt management if a defect is present, which can sometimes improve the outcome, depending on the condition.
What a journey through these two families. It's been fascinating to see how these congenital issues present so differently. From that highly lethal choanal atresia in llamas, needing that immediate nasal breathing, to the complex, widespread effects of that single piebald gene in deer. The higher rate we see documented in domestic camelids, often tied to genetics, really contrasts with the wild deer, doesn't it? Where survival pressures mean we just don't see affected animals as much, but it hints at these potentially powerful environmental factors too.
Indeed. The sources really paint a picture of this complex dance between genetics, the environment, and just the intricate pathways of development itself. Camelids give us one view, often clear genetically because of breeding and observation. Cervids in the wild give us another, highlighting survival challenges and maybe pointing more towards those environmental influences that are just harder to pin down. It really shows we need different approaches, different ways of thinking when we study health and manage versus wild populations.
Absolutely. So thinking about all these intricate details, these specific patterns of what can go wrong during development in just these two animal families, what is really understanding these vulnerabilities, this developmental biology, teach us, not just about animals, but maybe about the whole complex dance of life across all species, including us? It feels like a powerful reminder of just how much there is still to learn, doesn't it, from every single corner of the animal kingdom.